This really happened to me. I was 22, a senior at Boston University. When my family managed to turn my grandmother's funeral into a battleground, my boyfriend turned our apartment into a liar's nest, and my cousin decided he could erase me with a single sheet of paper. At the will reading, a buzzing iPhone skittered across the polished mahogany table. On its cracked screen, a preview banner lit up with the message that sliced my world open. Evan says she'll fold. Push the Beacon condo to Grant. The phone belonged to the firm's paralegal. We were in a leather and brass conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows throwing Back Bay into cold daylight, and my cousin Grant leaned back, smug as a cat who'd licked cream and claws. The paralegal, cheeks flushing, snatched her phone and flipped it over, but the words were already stamped onto the inside of my skull. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The rest of that morning was a blur of sharpened syllables and the smell of legal paper. Grant wore a navy suit, cut too tight in the shoulders, like he was trying to flex his way into legitimacy. My grandmother, Eleanor Ames, Laney to everyone, had left behind the Beacon Hill condo where she'd kept crayons for me in a crystal sugar bowl and a cedar box of postcards from places she never had time to visit. She died in September, the week the Charles turned cold and the esplanade trees started to go sour at the edges. We'd all orbited her, an archivist of holidays, a keeper of stories, the woman who taught me to double knot my sneakers and annotate margins. If our family had been a constellation, she was the single star that made it a shape. "I'm just saying," Grant said to the attorney, "that the condo needs a steward with vision. Riley's a student. She can't handle it." His voice was this slippery, measured pitch he'd learned in frat debates and networking luncheons. He ran a junior development arm under a bigger real estate firm, which meant he tossed around words like steward and synergy and shook hands as if he were sealing a treaty. He called what he did curating urban futures, which I always thought sounded like a hazard warning. The attorney, Hargreaves, read the formal will. Part of it, to my astonishment, made me the primary beneficiary of the Beacon Hill condo, except there was a caveat. "There is an addendum," Hargreaves said, turning to a final page. "A conditional clause recorded last February." He cleared his throat. "The property may be sold for the benefit of the family trust unless the beneficiary can demonstrate long-term stability and a plan for the property's preservation." Grant's mouth curled. "And look who spent the last 2 years couch-hopping and changing majors." "I live 5 stops down the B line," I said. "I have the same major. Journalism." "Journalism," he repeated like it was a punchline. I felt Evan's knee press against mine under the table, a gesture he'd used to soothe me in classes and coffee shops, like a tiny Morse code of us. We'd been together since sophomore winter, a fog of late-night ramen and Amazon returns and Sunday laundry. He had a job at a prop-tech startup, the sort of place with a ping-pong table and kombucha taps, and he'd been the one to schedule our Uber that morning, pour coffee into travel tumblers, tell me I looked like competence in a black dress. Hargreaves set down the paper. "The addendum also mentions a letter to be read aloud." "That won't be necessary," Grant cut in. "The will is the will." "If Laney wrote a letter, we read the letter," I said, my voice steady and small as a drawn arrow. But Hargreaves frowned. "I'm afraid we don't have the letter on file." Grant turned to me with an expression of manufactured sympathy. "If it helps, I spent a lot of time with Laney in her last months." He had. He'd started showing up around June. He'd drop off pastries from Tata, fold thin sweaters, install an app on her phone to manage medications. The first time he took her to a doctor's appointment alone, Aunt Rose texted a sea of clapping hands emojis. "Grant's stepping up," she'd written. "Finally a man in the family handling things." The unspoken part was that my being there, watering plants, reading her old postcards aloud, didn't count as handling. "You could move into the condo, temporarily," Grant suggested, looking solicitously at Hargreaves. While we list it, the buzzing iPhone had quieted, face down like a sleeping fish, but I could still see the message. Evan says she'll fold. My heart tripped over the name. Evan. My Evan. I glanced at him. He had that skewed smile he used to make me feel like we were a team, to make waiters grin back at him, to score discounts at furniture stores. His eyes were a blue that got lighter when he lied, something I only realized later, when I was replaying rooms like surveillance footage. "Riley," Hargreaves prompted, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" My grandmother had once told me, while we were making Boston cream pie in her narrow kitchen, "If a room tries to shrink you, make more room." She showed me how to whisk without clinking the bowl. She showed me how to date notes in the margin, her penciled arrows running like train tracks. She had long fingers with a constellation of pale moles, a signpost hand. "Yes," I said. "I want to see the file." They brought me into an inner room lined with binders. Hargreaves opened a manila folder with my grandmother's name typed neatly on the tab. There, behind the certified will, was the addendum, 2 lines in a font that wasn't hers, and a rubbery blue notary stamp, with a signature I didn't recognize. "Who notarized this?" I asked. "A Ms. Jessica Langley," he said, "my paralegal." The same Jessica whose screen had flashed with Evan's name. Outside on Clarendon Street, the air smelled like cold stone and coffee. I walked fast enough that my heels scratched the sidewalk like matches. Evan trailed me. "You were incredible, Lau," he said, his voice too bright. "You were so composed." "What did you tell Jessica?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "Your name popped up on her phone," I said. "Telling her I'd fold, telling her to push the condo to Grant." He spread his hands, palms up, the way he always did when he was about to say something just plausible enough to be insulting. "Jess is Grant's paralegal. I reached out to her last week to make sure the meeting ran smoothly for you. That's all. Maybe she put my name in a note." "And the word fold?" "It's a chess term, babe." "That's poker." "Whatever." We stood under a gray sky. Buses exhaled at the curb. I had the sensation of being inside a snow globe someone had just shaken, flakes suspended, reality waiting to fall. I thought of the thin blue stamp and the way the letter had vanished. "Come on," he said softly. Let's get lunch. You haven't had anything. You'll feel better with food." We ended up at a Panera on Boylston because it was close and familiar, and because my mind couldn't push past the next 10 minutes. I sat with a bowl of soup and couldn't taste a thing. Evan's phone chimed on the table, and he flipped it over deliberately, almost theatrically private. He used to let it lie face up until midnight, his notifications fluttering like moths. Somewhere between "I love you" and "we're good," he'd learned to put it face down. When I got back to my Brookline apartment that night, Maya, my roommate and best friend, sat cross-legged on the couch with a bowl of popcorn. She wore my grandmother's old cardigan, the oatmeal one with the kind of pearl buttons you can actually bite. "I thought you'd be celebratory," she said gently. "Is it bad?" I told her everything. By the time I got to the iPhone message, she had set the bowl on the coffee table and was looking at me not as my roommate, but like a paramedic watching for signs of shock. "You think Evan's in on it?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know anything." Maya had a way of asking questions that made chaos sort itself. "What do you actually know? What is fact?" "Fact. There's an addendum that reads like it was made by someone who never met my grandmother's handwriting or voice. Fact. The notary is the paralegal whose phone blurted out a message linking my boyfriend to my cousin's scheme. Fact. Grant's had his eye on the condo since I was 9, and we played Monopoly on its rug, and he tried to buy the brownstones with paper clips. So what do we do?" In my ears, my grandmother's voice, "Make more room." "We make a plan," I said. I went to class the next morning because a plan needs routine to survive. In investigative reporting, Professor Latham stood like a coat rack in tweed and asked, "What's the difference between gossip and evidence?" Gossip is oxygen, a girl in the back said. Latham nodded. And evidence? Fire. I spent the afternoon at Pavement Coffee House on Commonwealth Avenue, laptop open, fingers cold above the keyboard. I read about Massachusetts probate law until the words stopped holding hands with meaning. I looked up notary regulations and saw that a notary has to witness a signature, confirm identity, and keep a journal, an actual physical log, of notarial acts. The journal is not private property. In a dispute, it's discoverable. That night, Evan showered before coming over. He smelled like the hotel shampoo from that co-working space near South Station that he used sometimes, even though his office was in the seaport. He sat on my bed in a towel while I highlighted statutes like scripture. Grant has money to burn, he said, scrolling through something on his phone. If the condo becomes part of the family trust, it grows. You'd still benefit. I don't want benefit, I said. I want what she left me. He put his phone down and touched my ankle, fingers grazing bone. Babe, you know I'm on your side, right? I nodded without letting myself feel it. 2 days later, I found myself in a narrow office off Tremont Street, the sign on the frosted glass reading, Langley Notary Services. Jessica Langley looked younger than I'd expected, her lipstick too glossy, her bangs freshly cut. She recognized me and pasted on a smile built for office parties. I'm so sorry for your loss, she told me. I'm here to see your notary journal entries, I said, for February through March. Her smile flickered. Our records are internal. They're legally discoverable, I said, keeping my voice mild. I can file for them, or you can let me view the entries related to my grandmother's addendum. We can set something up through the firm, she said. Let me check calendar availability. She tried to usher me out, but Maya had come with me and was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. Calendar availability? She repeated like she was tasting a weird candy. Jessica ended up finding the page where she'd notarized the addendum. The entry was skinny. E. Ames. A date in February. A driver's license number. No address listed. Sign here to acknowledge viewing, she said. Her eyes flitted to my hands, as if afraid I might smuggle the page out under my nails. Where did you meet her? I asked. Here, she said quickly. At the office. My grandmother didn't leave Beacon Hill in February, I said. She had pneumonia. She barely left the sofa. Jessica's tongue flicked against her teeth. She was a person who'd found herself on the wrong team a long time ago and told herself the scoreboard was broken. It's a particular kind of moral math. I didn't need to prove it to her. I needed to prove it in a room that mattered. We filed a caveat in probate court, which Latham helped me draft, officially objecting to the addendum and requesting verification of the notarial entry. We also asked the court to order production of any supplemental letter my grandmother mentioned, plus digital metadata for the addendum file. Hargreaves wasn't an enemy, not exactly. He was weather. The storm was Grant. Grant called me that night. You don't want to do this? He said without even saying hello. What is this? This, dragging the family through court, making yourself look naive and greedy. You tried to disinherit me with a fake clause, I said. You brought court into this. That clause is valid. I know her voice, I said. That clause is someone else's. He was silent for a beat. I'm in the condo now, he said. Sitting on the blue sofa. It creaks. You always said the blue sofa creaked like an old ship. Why are you in there? I asked. None of us were supposed to be in there, not until the estate settled. Protecting assets, he said. But since I'm here, I could hear him moving, the sound of drawer handles. I found a box labeled Riley. Cute. Don't touch anything. He laughed quietly. Oh, cousin, I've been touching things since June. Maya's eyes found mine. She'd been listening on speaker. She mouthed, He's baiting you. I muted the phone and whispered, I want to get him on record. Unmute, she mouthed, and ask him what he wants. What do you want, Grant? I asked. I want a family that isn't allergic to its own success, he said. I want a memory that isn't your turning our grandmother's home into a museum for your sentimental phases. And I want you to stop pretending Lainey didn't know you were a flight risk. A week later, the court ordered Jessica to produce her notary journal and Hargreaves to produce the digital original of the addendum. We sat in a cold room while a court clerk clicked through properties on a PDF. The addendum had been scanned in March. The scanner's serial number didn't match anything in Hargreaves's office. The metadata suggested it had been created on a device registered to J. Langley 01. Ms. Langley, the clerk asked, did you draft this addendum? No, she said, eyes flicking to Grant's attorney, a woman in a charcoal sheath with nail polish like gunmetal. I typed what Miss Ames dictated. Where? At her condo. In February. Yes. With pneumonia. Jessica went very still. I was told she was tired. The judge scheduled a full hearing for mid-November and asked both sides to submit additional evidence. After the hearing, Maya and I walked down Tremont toward the Common. The air had the brittle snap of weather that intended to stay. I stuffed my hands into my coat pockets and felt the cool oval of something I'd tucked there weeks ago. My grandmother's engraved bracelet, the one she'd given me when I turned 16, the inside etched with an address she said she loved, the Beacon Hill condo, and one small symbol, a neat little compass rose with a dot in the north. Lainey didn't do symbols, I told Maya. She did words. What if the symbol is a word? We went to the condo together the next morning. I'd gotten a key from Hargreaves officially, since I was named beneficiary, even with the caveat. The condo felt like it always had. Lemon oil and dust and a hint of woolite, light pooling on the hardwood like syrup. There was the blue sofa with its ship's creak. There were the postcards, banded in elastic, tagged by year. There were the shelves of books in spines the color of old teeth. We began to search, not ransacking, not even rummaging. We handled things like worshippers. We found the box labeled Riley Grant had taunted me about. Inside were the things that make up a person's echo. A clay necklace I'd made in 3rd grade, a napkin from our first Red Sox game, a photo of us on the swan boats. Compass, Maya said. Where would a compass point? To north, I said. But in a room, what is north? The room doesn't know north. The unit overlooks Willow Street. North is the back wall. I walked to the back wall and found the old framed watercolor of the Charles. I took it down. Behind it, the wall was smooth plaster. But below the frame's hanging wire, taped to the back of the painting, was a folded paper sealed with red wax. Maya inhaled the sound of a prayer. We stared until the air felt denser. If we open it now, I said, and it's private. It was sealed to be unsealed, Maya said. But I didn't open it. Not there, not in a room that had always made me feel watched over. Somewhere inside me, a part that had learned from my grandmother to respect closures and openings, took the lead. Let's document, I said. I raised my phone and took photos of the painting's back, the seal, the tape. We placed the letter into an archival sleeve from a portfolio my grandmother had kept in the hall closet. We time-stamped everything. We also found something I hadn't known to look for, an index card with a few lines, in my grandmother's careful handwriting, tucked into a hollowed-out cookbook spine. The card was addressed to me. The message read, R. If anyone wants the house more than you do, they want something from you haven't learned to protect yet. Be brave enough to stay. Below it, in smaller letters, she'd written, Addendum, read with the letter. We made an appointment with Hargreaves to open the sealed letter at his office with a court recorder present. I slept badly the night before, my heart waking me up like a house alarm, dreams cluttered with hallways and doors that wouldn't open. Evan didn't come over. He'd been busy. Busy had turned into a scaffolding he climbed to avoid holding eye contact. When he did stay, his phone never left his hand. He had new cologne, something woodsy he said he'd gotten from a co-worker's sample box. The scent made me think of hotel hallways. Maya, who didn't believe in passivity, did something small but seismic. She logged into our shared AT&T account and looked at call logs for the last month. "No hacking," she said to me, "just looking at what we pay for." Evan had a pattern of late-night calls to a number saved as K. The calls happened 12 minutes after texts from Grant. "Who's K?" Maya asked. I said I didn't know. Then my stomach dropped because I did. K was Kira, a woman Evan had been DMing the summer after sophomore year, a woman he'd said was just a friend from a WeWork near Government Center. I opened Instagram and found Kira immediately. She posted stories from wine bars with geotags in the seaport, boomerangs of martinis, a photo of a keycard with the caption, "Work hard, play harder." In one mirror selfie, sliding into frame at the edge, was Evan's phone case, black with a chipped corner. It was like seeing a ghost in a window. The night before the letter opening, I drove to the hotel tagged in her story, an over-designed boutique place near Fort Point with chairs that looked like they'd won design awards. I sat in my car and watched people check in, men in Patagonia vests, women in heels that made it clear they'd practiced. I took a deep breath and walked in like I belonged. I asked the front desk if a small leather notebook had been turned in, set in a room under Evan P. The woman behind the desk checked the lost and found nothing. She did, however, confirm without meaning to that Evan had a folio on file. "We can text him," she said, "if you want to check if he's still on property." "Thanks, God," I said, backing away, cheeks hot with the radiation of humiliation. I left and sat on the cold curb and called Maya. She picked up on the first ring. "You don't have to go after that, you know," she said. "After tomorrow, you don't have to go back." I knew she meant Evan. She meant all of it. We opened the letter the next day. Hargreaves's conference room smelled faintly of leather and peppermint. The court recorder set up the machine with its tiny microphones like a stage for percussion. I slid the archival sleeve across the table. Hargreaves unsealed the wax with a letter opener shaped like a tiny sword. He unfolded the paper and read, "My dear Riley," he started, and my name was a bell in that room. If this is being read, I expect two realities. I am gone, and the condo is being negotiated like a piece of fruit in a market by people who never once noticed that the painting in the hallway hangs a half-inch to the left. I closed my eyes. Hargreaves continued reading, voice neutral, breath steady. "The house is yours, if you want it. Not to sell, but to live in and carry forward. If you need proof against the babble of men with opinions, there is an addendum written in my own hand and sealed with this letter. If anyone produces a version not written in my hand, trust your instincts. In my kitchen drawer is a book of ciphers we used when you were small. Use it to decipher the second paragraph so you can show it to whatever judge needs showing. Remember, plans are faith made visible. I trust your plan." He lifted a second sheet, the addendum in her hand, dated March 12th, with the same neat, looping letters I'd watched 1,000 times as a child from the other side of a breakfast table. The second paragraph had letters that looked wrong, odd. I realized they were an acrostic, the first letter of every line spelling out, "Do not sell, live here, make a writer's room, teach kids." I was 22 and still a kid. But in that room, hearing her voice encoded in the exact way she had taught me, I felt older by a decade. Grant's attorney argued that a different addendum had already been filed and that this letter was sentimental, not legal. But the judge had the notary journal in front of him, half complete, sloppily maintained. He had the PDF metadata. He had the brand new addendum in Laney's hand and the cipher. He had the fact that the notary's stamp did not match the one Jessica had used when notarizing other documents. The judge stared at the blue seal like it was a bruise that could tell stories. We scheduled a final evidentiary hearing. It would be formal, it would be paper, it would be the place where I needed my revenge to be lawful and devastating, not dramatic and flammable. Still, there is a way to use light to tell a story before paper has its say. Grant was on the board of a mid-tier charity that ran a gala every November at the Boston Harbor Hotel. It would be Grant's moment to peacock. He planned to announce a significant gift, which, I now realized, he'd hoped to finance by selling the condo and funneling a portion through his name. Evan had been invited as a +1. There would be a photo booth, a step and repeat, a rented string quartet doing an ironic cover of a Taylor Swift song. Maya and I made a plan. Not a stunt, a reveal. We built a timeline, printed large and neat enough to be seen across a ballroom, scanned emails showing Jessica sending a draft in your grandmother's style to Grant, a Venmo payment from Grant to Kay with a pencil emoji and a condo emoji, Evan forwarding calendar invites, screenshots from Kira's stories with timestamps matching the nights Evan had lied about late stand-ups. I filed a complaint with the state notary division against Jessica and lodged a grievance with the firm's ethics officer. And I wrote a letter to the charity's board chair, an attorney himself, informing him that any significant gift announced by Mr. Grant Ames that appeared to be tied to an as-yet unsettled estate would be subject to clawback. I did not mention Evan in the letter to the board chair. His humiliation was not the same as justice, but his role mattered, and I wasn't going to protect him from the consequences of collusion. I scheduled a meeting with his HR department. It turned out their employee handbook included a section on conflicts of interest around real estate transactions and improper use of inside information obtained through personal relationships. I arrived with a binder, messages, timelines, notarized statements, and a list of dates when Evan had accessed company property listing pipelines that correlated suspiciously with dates on which Grant had proposed ideas to his own firm. The HR director was a woman with kind eyes and the sort of patience that comes from cleaning up other people's messes professionally. She asked almost no questions, and at the end thanked me for bringing this forward. She did not tell me what would happen next. She didn't need to. I had done my part, a report, not a rumor. The night of the gala, I wore a black dress with sleeves like whispers, and my grandmother's bracelet. Maya wore red because red is what you wear when you want to be seen reading a room. The ballroom bobbed with glassware and ambition. Grant shook hands and flashed smile after smile. Evan hovered a step behind him, thinner than usual around the eyes, a man trying very hard to keep several plates in the air with breath alone. I didn't hustle up to the stage or yank a mic. I waited. At desserts, when the string quartet slid into an earnest cover of Exile, the board chair stepped onto the stage and tapped the mic. "We're honored tonight to have so many friends," he said. "We are, however, committed to ensuring our donors' gifts are made free of encumbrance." He paused just long enough for the room to pivot toward him. "To that end, any announcements tonight about significant gifts will be postponed pending the outcome of a probate matter. We appreciate your understanding." Grant's smile faltered, then hardened like hot sugar hitting marble. He took 2 steps toward the stage and then stopped because there was nowhere for him to go that didn't look like flailing. Maya squeezed my hand so hard my fingers hummed. "Now," she whispered. "We didn't do anything theatrical. We wheeled in a poster board on an easel. At the top, neat letters, timeline. Below, the photos and documents speaking in a choir of fonts. Jessica, seeing her name, went pale and turned away. Kira turned off her phone. Evan stood in front of the board as if proximity could burn evidence out of existence. He looked at me with something like pleading, like we were in a fight about who had left the cap off the toothpaste. "Riley," he said, "this is insane." "This is documentation," I said. "You're ruining me," he said. "You ruined yourself." Maya had printed one particular screenshot larger than the others, the preview banner from that iPhone on the day of the will reading. "Evan says she'll fold. Push the Beacon condo to Grant." I watched Evan read his own words blown up 5 times their size. He reached for me, instinct, habit, and I stepped back. Around us, people did the thing people do in public when they want to pretend something isn't happening. They looked through it. But they were also curious. Curiosity is older than etiquette. I left before any catering person had to tell us to move the easel. Outside, the harbor air was so clean it felt new. I took off my heels and carried them the way girls carry their shoes in movies, like they're heavy and they might weight you to the ground if you let them. 2 weeks later, at the final probate hearing, Hargreaves spoke. Grant's attorney spoke. The judge heard testimony from Jessica, from me, from the neighbor down the hall, who'd notarized documents for half the building, and who recognized my grandmother's hand from decades of notes slid under her door. The judge took in the sealed letter, the cipher, the addendum in Laney's own script. He took in the mismatched notary stamp and the PDF's provenance. He took in the way my voice did not shake when I said, "My grandmother taught me to annotate. She told me to trust what I can prove." His ruling was measured, almost boring in its restraint, which is how it should be when someone is righting a wrong. He invalidated the February addendum. He accepted the handwritten addendum and the sealed letter. He ordered that I be granted the condo in fee, simple with a condition subsequent. If I sold within 10 years to anyone but a nonprofit or an educational institution, the property would revert to the trust. He ordered a copy of his ruling sent to the state notary division. He recommended that the firm review its internal controls. Grant surrendered his keys in the hallway outside the courtroom like he was turning in worn-out tickets. As he did, Evans slipped toward the elevator, and for the first time since the will reading, I watched him not look at me. The elevator doors closed on his profile. He was gone before his HR department called him in, but not before they had begun to document their own timeline. I didn't gloat. It's not that gloating is immoral. It's just that the win had a solemn shape to it, like the inside of a bell. Joy, yes, but joy colored by the fact that Laney should still have been alive to see me read her note aloud in a courtroom. The first night I slept in the condo, I lay in my grandmother's bed with the windows cracked and listened to the city breathe. The radiator clanked. Someone laughed on the sidewalk and then apologized on the phone to the person they'd woken. I thought about making it a museum of love, the postcard bands, the blue sofa, the cookbook with its hollow spine, the bracelet glinting on my wrist. Then I thought about the second line of the cipher, make a writer's room. I pushed the blue sofa to the side and began to reimagine the front room with a long table and good lamps and a chalkboard where kids could write the first sentences of their first stories. A week later, I posted a notice on a community board at the Boston Public Library, after-school writing room on Beacon Hill, free, ages 12 to 16. Bring your homework, bring your curiosity. The first week, 2 kids showed up, a boy named Liam who liked the Celtics, and a girl named Anna who wanted to be a chef but secretly wrote poems about bridges. We ate clementines and talked about plot. At the end of December, I boxed up Evan's things. He came to collect them because texting is a courage he did not possess. He stood in the doorway of the condo he'd hoped to push out from under me and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? We could start over." "The thing about starting over," I said, "is that the old start is still under there. It doesn't disappear. It builds foundations you can't trust." He said something about therapy and closure. I said something about honesty and timelines. He left with a cardboard box and a face arranged into remorse. It may even have been real. I didn't need to know. Grant tried to call me on New Year's Day. I didn't answer. He sent a long text that read like a press release to himself. He used phrases like moving forward and big picture. I blocked his number. Later, Maya sent me a link to a news brief that mentioned the charity had declined a tentative pledge and that a paralegal at Hargreaves's firm had resigned to pursue other opportunities. It snowed the week before classes started again. I shoveled the stoop and watched the flakes blur the old gas lamps, then came inside and made hot chocolate with too much whipped cream. I stood at the window and looked at the watercolor, now rehung, a half-inch left of center. The back of the frame was solid, The wax seal replaced by my grandmother's initials traced in pencil, the kind of signature that looks like it knows it's temporary. I put the bracelet on my nightstand. The compass rose winked in the light like a tiny eye. North was sometime else now, not the back wall, not the city. North was a plan. 10 years to prove that a thing left in love could multiply if you cared for it without turning it into currency. Sometimes the story ends with a bang. Sometimes it ends with a room quietly rearranged and a girl who has learned how to make more room. The last thing I do before bed is write my name on a Post-it and stick it to my desk calendar. Riley, you stay. In the morning, I wake up to coffee and the street cleaner and the knowledge that if someone wants something from me that I haven't learned to protect yet, my grandmother taught me where to hide it and how to find it again. I don't need a cipher for that. I just need my hands, the room, and the breath inside them. The end.